Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about, let me get this over a little bit, our scatter plots. So I'm going to move this guy so we can see it. And this is going to be out of Module 20, and I do use a lot of the examples from this module as well. So you're going to possibly want to print some out or at least refer to them as I go through this. So I will be bringing some of those examples from Module 20.1, both parts A and B. So we're going to kind of try to go through those today. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about scatter plots. And scatter plots are basically when we want to graph something we call bivariate data. Bi does mean two, and variate means that we have two varying measures that we have. So, for example, when I'll be graphing for you is a height and a person's weight. That's two different pieces of measurement that we have on people. That's simply what we mean by bivariate data. And what we're going to be doing is creating a graph from this, and we will be using some variables that we have, and we're going to call one of them our independent variable. And that's the one we're going to let be our x values, and this one will be on that horizontal axis. And the other one will be our dependent, or sometimes referred to as the response variable. And that's going to be our variable y, which is going to be on that vertical axis. Okay, there will be some problems that it really isn't going to matter which one is which. If we know like something that we can control, like the amount of a drug a person gets, and we want to measure their outcome based on that, it kind of sets up the independent and the dependent. Hence the word, this response is used quite a bit. When we use scatter plots, or when to use them, is when we're trying to do some of the following situations. Scatter plot. Okay, which is what we're going to learn how to do. And we have the number of variables. And so if we have two variables paired by observations, two variables, and they're paired, kind of like a person's height and weight, which is where I'm going to draw one for you, show you how to use Excel today. Okay, when our data is numerical is when we will also do this. And when our purpose is when we're trying to see if there's some sort of relationship. So we're going to try to investigate the relationship between the variables. And as we work through chapter or module 20, we'll be looking at how do we determine those relationships. Okay. I'm going to kind of show you the steps using Excel, and then we're going to just kind of look at some of the things that we're going to be looking for when looking at our information. So what I've done is in Excel is I did type some data. We have some height of some people and the weight of some people. And what I'm going to do with that is we're going to create a scatter plot. The easiest way to create a scatter plot is to highlight my data. So I kind of grabbed and dragged my mouse. And then we go up to this insert button. So we click the insert button. And we see all these different charts that are available to us. The one with the little dots, if I kind of hover over it, you'll notice it says insert scatter or bubble chart. I'm going to choose that option, and I'm going to just pick this guy. Okay, you will notice first of all that it does not have any titles or labels or much. You can change this, just click on that and change it. And we have tools and formatting, so feel free to play with this, but this just is a brief introduction to how to get those. Reminder, when you are creating graphs, we should label these axes. So this axis down here was that first column that you put in there. This right here is going to be that second. It always does read it as X and Y. And so we can find that 64, there's that 64, 115 is probably in here. Must have had another 64, 105 and a 64, 180. So there's our 64, 180. So there is our scatter plot. What we're going to be looking for in these scatter plots is for some sort of general pattern. We're going to be looking for, does it seem that there's a straight line forming in this? Does it look like we have as one variable increases, the other variable increases, so we see an upward trend? Or is it the other way, that when one variable increases, it tends to have a downward trend? Is there some sort of curve showing up in this data? A lot of times what we want to do is be able to do some predictions based on data. So they'll look at our data and then predict what's going to happen. And that's kind of where we're going to be ending, is how to use this information to predict things. But in this video, we're just going to get a brief introduction and kind of look at some graphs and see what happens. So if I'm looking at this graph, I kind of see that as this increases, I do tend to see this slight upward trend. We also look at our graph to see if we see any outliers, any data points that look kind of out of the norm. And this guy up here, this person who was 64 inches tall, who weighed 180 pounds, that could possibly be an outlier, someone who's a little bit heavier than they normally are. And we can determine a lot of times based on things we've done in the past if it is or is not an outlier. But that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to show you some other curves, so I'm going to shrink this guy so I can get my full screen here. And then we're just going to look at some other examples from the textbook or from our module, the reading, and I'm just going to kind of put these up here. This is from section 20.1b, so the very first grouping. So there were some really nice pictures that I saw. And here's a scatter plot, so they drew all the little dots for us. And here they even kind of put in a straight line that kind of seems to fit this pattern. What we'll be looking for in this sections is just, is it an upward trend, a curved trend? So we're going to be saying, is it linear? So a straight line. Is there some sort of curve going on? Or do we have it just all over the place? And then if we do see a pattern, what direction is it going? Is it going up? Is it going down? So is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And the last couple things we'll look for is how strong of a relationship do we have. We will learn a measurement for strength in the next couple sections. So if I'm looking at this guy right here, I would say that I do see a linear pattern. Okay, because I do see that kind of straight line. I also see that it is decreasing, going downward. Or a negative, kind of going downward. I would say that this is pretty strong, so I would say it is a strong relationship because those points are pretty close to that line. They're pretty closely grouped. If I'm looking at this graph here, I don't see any outliers. I don't see a dot kind of way off in the middle of nowhere. So that's kind of the things we're going to be looking for just at this point. Okay, so we can kind of get an idea of what we mean by linear, curved, strong, and so forth. They did also give us these values. So if I'm looking at this one, they kind of seem to see that straight line. Here you can almost visualize that curve sitting in here. Now a curve does not necessarily have to come back up, but we would see some sort of curve. This one here, there's points all over the place, so I really don't see any association. So those are the three different shapes we're going to kind of look for. And then we'll look for positives and negatives. So this would have an upward trend, so we would say it's got a positive trend. In other words, as this guy increased, this guy increased. Here is a negative trend. It's going down. As this guy increases, this guy decreases. So let's just look at some examples and kind of make some decisions. All right, so this one we have miles per gallon and the weight of a vehicle. So this is the weight of your vehicle. This is how many miles per gallon we get. I kind of see some sort of, I'm going to do that part first, negative trend because I see stuff going down. I would say that I can almost visualize a straight line in here using my pen as my straight line. You know, there's kind of that straight line. So I would say this is pretty linear. Okay. Fairly strong because they look like they're pretty close. Again, I'll put my pen back up there. You know, if I put my pen back on there kind of as that line, that kind of seems to fit. They're all kind of pretty close to that line. And I do not really see any outliers that I could come up with. No one was kind of way off the beaten path, except maybe this guy. But then again, you know, it's hard to say. Okay, let's do another one. These go relatively quickly. Okay, this one I see, I like to always do my positive and negative first. I see a positive trend. Things are going up. I do kind of see a line sitting in here. So I see somewhat linear. I would say it's somewhat strong. And I don't really see any outliers unless this guy's really an outlier. These guys could be making us see something that's not really there. Because if I looked at them without that, it's a little less steep, a little less positive. So it kind of depends on what we have. Again, when we're doing statistics, we like to have as many data points as we can. Because the more data points we have, the more confident we are in our statistical measure. So I'm going to say no outliers. But these guys could be causing a stronger upward trend than normal. Upward trend. Okay, so there might be some more discussion, more diving into this information than you would want to do. Okay, a couple more. If we look at this guy, again, I see a downward trend, so I see that negative strength. However, I don't really see a straight line because it seems to curve. So I would say we have a curve here, not really a straight line. I would say that this has I could have put this curve right on all those points. So I would say very strong relationship with that curve. I would also say no outliers because everybody was right on that curve if I had drawn it better. Okay, let's see. I have two more. So this one here, and then we have one more. Again, I see a positive trend because it is going up. Somewhat linear, because I could kind of put that line in there. Outliers, maybe, maybe not, because if I threw this guy out, Those other ones are definitely on the same value, but this guy's a little bit off. So possible outlier. And depending on if you think he's an outlier and want to keep him or get rid of him, I would say that it is strong. All right, last picture that I want to look at. Okay. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to kind of think what you think. Okay, so looking for positive or a negative. Well, I see points all over the place, so I don't see any association anywhere, so no association whatsoever. So I'm not really going to do any of those questions because it doesn't make sense. I don't see a straight line here. I do not see any no patterns. I don't see lines, curves, or any. So talking about being strong or weak kind of depends on if you can see that pattern. But since I see no patterns, no associations, just basically they're scattered all over the place, I'm not going to do any more studying of this relationship because obviously I don't see one. And that's the first thing a statistician will do when they're trying to find a relationship is they'll look. Does it even look like there is one? If there isn't a linear relationship, we're not going to go any further. They're just going to say, no, I didn't see any relationship. The scatter plot was all over the place. Similarly, when they see a curve, like this one, we had that nice strong curve, they would, and you want to say, is there a linear relationship? They'll say, no, there's no linear, but there's definitely a curved one going on here. So they wouldn't go and try to test to see if there's a straight line. We're going to be looking at straight lines to see if there are straight lines in this one, in our data. So if we came across this situation, we would say, no, there's a curve, not a straight line. I'm not going to go any further to do my testing. So this is a brief introduction into what we're looking at. Scatter plots looking for, what we will be looking for are straight line patterns. And then we'll learn the statistics and how to find that straight line, how to use that straight line, provided it is significant to do so. And that's what we'll be learning in the next few sections. I will see you guys in the next video.